My husband spent our $33,000 house fund to secretly spy on me. Then I checked his sister's phone. We had been married for 4 years. Mark worked as a senior project manager at a mid-sized logistics firm, and I was a graphic designer working remotely from our apartment in Chicago. We had a good life. It wasn't perfect, but we were saving for a house, talked about starting a family in a couple of years, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Mark was always the reliable type. He wasn't overly emotional, but he was steady. Then, the company announced a major restructuring, and Mark was put in the running for a regional director position. It was a massive step up, with a salary increase that would instantly fast-track our house fund. He started working late, which I expected. What I didn't expect was the sudden shift in how he handled his personal space. One Tuesday evening, Mark came home around 9 p.m. and tossed a brand new iPhone onto the kitchen counter. It had a heavy-duty black case, completely different from the minimalist clear case he used for his regular phone. When I asked him about it, he didn't look up from unlocking his laptop. He just said the company issued it because the new role required handling proprietary data and secure client communication. He said it was strictly for work, and his boss wanted him accessible to West Coast clients at odd hours. It made sense at the time. Corporate security is a real thing, and he was under a lot of pressure. But that night, I noticed he didn't leave the new phone on the kitchen counter when we went to bed. He put it face down on his nightstand, plugged into a charger on his side of the bed. The next few weeks became a blur of long hours. Mark was physically present on the weekends, but mentally, he was completely checked out. Every time the black phone buzzed, his entire posture changed. He would immediately pick it up, walk into the hallway, or step out onto the balcony, even if it was freezing outside. I told myself I was being paranoid. He was competing against 2 other internal candidates for a job that could change our lives. If he needed to take private calls from the VP of operations, that was just part of the grind. But then I noticed a tiny detail that didn't fit the corporate security narrative. Mark started changing his passwords. Not just on his work laptop, but on our shared tablet and the home Wi-Fi router. When the internet went down one Saturday morning, I went to log into the router admin page to reset it, using the password we had kept on a sticky note inside the kitchen cabinet for 3 years. It didn't work. When I asked Mark about it, he looked irritated. He said the IT department at his work warned him about residential network vulnerabilities, so he updated the security protocols for the whole apartment. He said he would write down the new password for me later. He never did. He just logged my laptop in himself while shielding the screen with his hand. That was the first time a cold knot formed in my stomach. Why would my husband need to hide a home Wi-Fi password from me? By the midpoint of the month, the emotional distance between us was a chasm. We stopped watching movies together. We stopped talking about our day. Every conversation was transactional. I asked him if the stress was getting to him, or if something else was wrong. He snapped at me, saying I didn't understand the pressure he was under and that my flexible freelance schedule gave me too much time to overthink things. It felt like a slap in the face. I kept quiet to avoid a massive fight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something massive. My mind went exactly where anyone's mind would go. I thought he was having an affair with someone at the office. The confirmation came on a Thursday night. Mark was in the shower, and the black phone was sitting on his nightstand. It lit up with a text message. I told myself I wouldn't be that wife. I told myself to respect his boundaries, but the knot in my stomach had grown into a heavy weight, and I couldn't stop myself. I walked over and looked at the screen. The preview was enabled. The message was from a contact saved simply as Operations. It read, "The baseline is set for tomorrow morning. Make sure she doesn't suspect anything before the paperwork goes through." My heart stopped. Make sure she doesn't suspect anything. There was no context, no names, just that chilling phrase. I stared at the screen until it went black again. She had to be me. Who else would he be hiding something from in our own home? The paperwork had to be divorce papers. It all clicked perfectly. The emotional distance, the secrecy, the new phone, the password changes. He was planning to blindside me with a divorce the moment his promotion went through, probably to protect his new income or hide assets before the legal process started. I stood there in the dark bedroom, listening to the sound of the shower running, feeling my entire world collapse. I didn't confront him that night. If he was playing a calculated game with lawyers and hidden assets, I knew I couldn't just scream and shout. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, Mark left for work at 7:30 a.m., looking completely normal. He kissed me on the cheek, told me he had a long day of meetings, and said he might be late. The moment the front door clicked shut, I called my closest friend, Sarah. Sarah is a paralegal at a family law firm downtown. I could barely get the words out without crying, explaining the text message, the secret phone, and the changed passwords. Sarah listened quietly, then told me to meet her for lunch near her office. When we met at a quiet diner, Sarah didn't give me the typical comforting friend speech. She was entirely professional, which actually helped calm my panic. She told me that if Mark was planning a strategic divorce, he would have spent the last few weeks gathering financial documents, moving money, or establishing a narrative. She advised me to check our joint bank accounts, our retirement portfolios, and the physical filing cabinet in our home office where we kept our marriage certificate, tax returns, and property documents. She told me to look for missing files or unexpected withdrawals. If he was preparing paperwork, the evidence would be in the numbers. I went back to the apartment and immediately opened my laptop to check our joint savings account. We had about $45,000 saved up for a down payment on a house. When the page loaded, my breath caught in my throat. The balance was $12,000. Over the course of the last 3 weeks, $33,000 had been moved out of the account in increments of exactly $9,900 and $5,000. The transfers were labeled as external wire transfer, but there was no recipient name visible on the basic online portal. He was draining our savings. He was taking the money we built together and hiding it before throwing divorce papers in my face. I ran to the home office and pulled open the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. It was unlocked. I reached for the thick manila folder labeled Financials Tax. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it, scattering papers across the hardwood floor. As I knelt down to gather them, I realized the folder was incredibly light. Our tax returns from the last 2 years were gone. The physical statements for Mark's 401k were gone. The deed to the car we bought last year was gone. He hadn't just moved digital money. He had scrubbed the apartment of every legal document that proved our financial entanglement. I sat on the floor among the few remaining scraps of paper, completely numb. The man I loved, the man I built a life with, was systematically erasing me from his financial existence while looking me in the eye every night and telling me he was just stressed about a promotion. I felt a toxic mix of intense grief and boiling rage. I wasn't going to let him ruin my life without a fight. I called Sarah back, my voice completely cold this time. I told her about the $33,000 and the missing documents. She paused for a long time on the line. She told me this was moving faster than she expected, and that I needed to hire a senior partner at her firm immediately. She set up an appointment for Monday morning. That weekend was the most agonizing 48 hours of my life. I had to act completely normal. I cooked dinner, I asked him how his day was, and I watched him play his part. He looked tired, almost guilty, which I interpreted as the absolute bare minimum of a conscience struggling with what he was about to do to me. Every time he picked up the black phone, I wanted to rip it out of his hands and smash it against the wall. But I kept my composure. I needed to get through the weekend until I could see the lawyer on Monday. On Monday morning, I walked into the law firm downtown. The attorney, a sharp woman named Eleanor, looked through the printouts of the bank statements I managed to download. She told me the incremental transfers of $9,900 were a classic tactic to avoid internal banking flags that trigger at $10,000, though it actually constitutes structuring, which is illegal. She said we could file an emergency motion to freeze his accounts and force him to disclose where the money went, but we needed a physical address or an active account number to attach it to. She told me to go back home and find any receipt, any slip of paper, or any digital trail that showed where that $33,000 landed. I spent the afternoon searching the apartment while Mark was at work. I looked through his laundry, his shoe boxes, the pockets of his winter coats, and the backs of drawers. Nothing. Then, I remembered his old laptop. It was an old MacBook he used in college that sat in a storage box in the guest closet. He hadn't used it in a year, but it was still synced to his personal Apple ID. If he was receiving emails about the new bank accounts or wire transfers, they might be syncing to the old mail app if he forgot to log out. I dug the laptop out, plugged it in, and turned it on. It required a password, but it was his old standard one, the one he used before the promotion madness started. It worked. The desktop loaded, and I immediately opened the email client. It took a few minutes to sync, downloading hundreds of unread messages. I typed the word transfer into the search bar. Dozens of work emails popped up, but then I saw one from a local credit union I had never heard of, Great Lakes Credit Union. The email was a confirmation for the opening of a new individual checking account under Mark's name only, dated exactly 3 weeks ago. Attached to the email was a digital copy of the initial deposit slip. It was for $9,900. But as I scrolled down the email thread to look for more details, I saw an email from an address that made my heart stop for the second time. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't a lawyer. It was from a private investigator agency based in downtown Chicago. The subject line read, "Update on subject, preliminary surveillance report." My fingers froze over the trackpad. I clicked the email. Attached was an encrypted PDF file. The password hint listed in the email was wife's birthday. I typed in my own birthday, my hands trembling. The file opened. It was a 20-page document filled with photographs. Photographs of me. There were pictures of me walking to the grocery store, pictures of me meeting my freelance clients at coffee shops, and pictures of me sitting by the window in our own apartment. The report listed my daily routine down to the exact minute. But the most horrifying part was the conclusion of the report. The private investigator had flagged 3 specific dates where I met with a male graphic design client named Julian. Julian was a high-end restaurant owner who had hired me to rebrand his business. We had met at his restaurant and a local cafe to discuss font choices and menu layouts. The report described these meetings as suspicious interactions with an unidentified male, noting that we sat close together to look at a laptop screen and that he had hugged me goodbye, a standard, polite, professional greeting. Mark hadn't opened a secret bank account to hide money from a divorce he was planning. He had hired a private investigator because he thought I was cheating on him. I sat in the dim light of the guest closet, staring at the photos of myself. The $33,000 wasn't a hidden divorce asset fund. It was the retainer and ongoing fees for a high-end private investigation firm and a forensic tech security team. The changed Wi-Fi passwords, the secure black phone, the constant secrecy. It wasn't because he was planning to leave me. It was because he believed our entire home network was compromised, or that I was using our shared devices to communicate with a lover. The text message from operations wasn't a lawyer. It was the head of the investigative agency setting a baseline for surveillance. A wave of intense relief washed over me, immediately followed by a profound, burning anger. He had spent our entire house savings, $33,000 of our future, because he was too insecure and too cowardly to ask me who I was having coffee with. He had destroyed our trust, tracked my movements, and treated me like a criminal in my own life based on absolutely nothing. I looked back at the email trail. There was a final message sent just that morning from the investigator to Mark. It read, "Final report compiled. No evidence of infidelity found. Subject's interactions are strictly professional. We are closing the file. Please review the attached final invoice." He knew. As of that morning, he knew I was completely innocent. He knew he had thrown away $33,000 on a ghost. And yet, he hadn't called me. He hadn't come home to apologize. He was probably sitting at his desk at work trying to figure out how to explain to his wife that their future home fund was gone because he was a paranoid lunatic. I downloaded the entire PDF report, the bank transfers, and the investigator's emails to a flash drive. I closed the old laptop, put it back in the box, and sat on the living room couch. I didn't cry. The sadness was completely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. He wanted a game of secrets and surveillance? Fine. I was going to give him exactly what he paid for. I called Eleanor, my attorney, and told her the situation had completely changed. It wasn't a hidden asset case anymore. It was waste of marital property during a period of marital breakdown. She told me that spending $33,000 of joint funds on a baseless investigation without my knowledge could absolutely be argued as dissipation of assets in a divorce court, meaning the judge could force him to pay me back every single cent out of his share of our remaining property. I told Eleanor to draw up the divorce papers immediately. I didn't want to be married to a man who would spy on me, lock me out of my own home internet, and drain our life savings over a professional hug. When Mark came home that night, the atmosphere in the apartment was suffocating. He looked pale, haggard, and completely exhausted. He didn't even look me in the eye when he walked past the kitchen. He took off his coat and sat at the dining room table, burying his face in his hands. The black phone was sitting right next to him. I walked over, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down opposite him. I didn't say a word. I just waited. After a long, agonizing silence, he looked up. His eyes were red. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cracking. "I know," I replied calmly. He took a deep breath, looking like he was about to confess to a murder. I made a massive mistake. A horrible, catastrophic mistake. I got passed over for the promotion 3 weeks ago. They gave it to David. I stared at him, blinking. "Wait, what? What do you mean you didn't get the promotion?" I asked, my brain struggling to recalibrate. Mark wiped his face, tears spilling over his eyes. The promotion required a comprehensive background check and financial audit because of the corporate restructuring. When they pulled my credit and financial history, they found an outstanding business loan from 8 years ago that my ex-business partner defaulted on. My name was still attached to it. The company viewed it as a financial liability. They told me I was disqualified from the regional director role. I sat perfectly still, my mind racing. Then what was the black phone? What was the $33,000? Mark looked at me, completely confused. "What $33,000? What are you talking about?" He looked genuinely bewildered. He wasn't acting. The panic on his face was real. But it didn't match the timeline of the emails I had just read on his old laptop. My chest tightened as a horrible realization began to take shape. I stood up, walked to the guest closet, grabbed the old MacBook, and slammed it down on the table in front of him. I opened the screen, showing the email client with the private investigator's report and the Great Lakes Credit Union account. "Don't lie to me, Mark!" I screamed, losing my composure for the first time. "You spent $33,000 spying on me! You locked me out of the Wi-Fi! You hired a private investigator because you thought I was sleeping with Julian!" Mark stared at the laptop screen, his face turning from pale to completely translucent. He looked at the emails, then looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. I didn't do this," he whispered. "It's your email account, Mark. It's your old laptop. It's your name on the credit union account. Don't lie to me, Mark," I screamed, losing my composure for the first time. "You spent $33,000 spying on me. You locked me out of the Wi-Fi. You hired a private investigator because you thought I was sleeping with Julian." Mark stared at the laptop screen, his face turning from pale to completely translucent. He looked at the emails, then looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. I didn't do this," he whispered. "It's your email account, Mark. It's your old laptop. It's your name on the credit union account." "Joy, listen to me," he said, his hands shaking as he reached for the mouse. "I swear to God, I haven't opened this laptop in over a year. I don't know what Great Lakes Credit Union is. I don't know who Julian is." He scrolled down the email client, his eyes darting across the screen. Suddenly, he stopped. He clicked on the account settings of the email app. The recovery email address listed for his personal account wasn't mine. And it wasn't his work email. It belonged to his sister, Brenda. The room went completely silent except for the humming of the refrigerator. Brenda, Mark's older sister who had always disliked me from the day we met. Brenda, who was a legal secretary at a corporate firm and knew exactly how to navigate financial structures. Brenda, who had access to our apartment because she looked after our cat whenever we went out of town. Mark clicked on the sent folder of the email client. There were dozens of emails sent from his account to the private investigator agency, but the timestamps were all during the middle of the day when Mark was confirmed to be in mandatory corporate meetings at his office. And then I saw the IP login history for the email account. Every single login for the past 3 weeks had originated from an IP address in Naperville, the suburb where Brenda lived. My head was spinning so fast I felt physically sick. The pieces were shifting again, forming an even more grotesque picture than before. Brenda had logged into Mark's old laptop during one of her visits to our apartment. Or she had guessed his old password. She had set up a dummy credit union account in his name using his personal information, which she easily had access to from her legal work background. But where did the $33,000 come from? Mark didn't have it. I knew the money had come out of our joint savings account. "Mark," I whispered, my voice trembling, "check our joint savings account right now." He pulled out his regular phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he logged into our banking app. When the balance popped up, he let out a choked sound. "Where is the money? Joy, where is our house fund? There's only $12,000 left." Your sister took it, I said, the reality hitting me like a physical blow. She used your information to wire the money out of our account, into that fake credit union account, and used it to hire a private investigator to follow me around, hoping to find proof that I was cheating on you so she could destroy our marriage. Mark stared at the screen, the absolute horror of what his own family had done finally sinking in. Brenda hadn't just stolen money. She had weaponized his old email, his identity, and our life savings to orchestrate a systematic character assassination against me. She knew Mark was under immense stress from the promotion, and she knew that if she presented him with a ready-made file showing his wife was unfaithful, he would be too broken to question where the data came from. The text message from operations saying, "Make sure she doesn't suspect anything before the paperwork goes through," wasn't about a divorce. It was Brenda talking to the investigator, making sure I didn't notice the surveillance before she could present the final evidence to Mark on his birthday, which was the following week. The sheer, calculated malice of it left both of us completely paralyzed. Mark sat at the table, tears streaming down his face, apologizing over and over again for not noticing how stressed he had been, for changing the Wi-Fi password, which he revealed he actually had done because he was paranoid about his work security after failing the audit. Completely independent of Brenda's plot. The two separate timelines of events had collided in a perfect storm of misunderstanding. But the story wasn't over. Brenda had the final report. She had received it that morning. She didn't know that the private investigator had found absolutely nothing. She thought she had the smoking gun. While Mark was still in shock, his regular phone began to ring on the dining table. The caller ID showed Brenda's name. Mark looked at me, his eyes wide with fear and rage. I reached over, tapped the screen, and put it on speakerphone. "Mark?" Brenda's voice came through the speaker, sounding breathless and falsely sympathetic. "Are you home? Honey, I need you to come over to my place right now. I have something incredibly difficult to show you. It's about Joy." I didn't want to believe it myself, but I hired some people to look into things, and Mark, she's been seeing someone else. I have the photos. I have everything. Mark looked at me, a cold, hard anger taking over his face. He wiped his tears and spoke into the phone, his voice completely steady. "I'm at home, Brenda. Joy is here too. Why don't you bring the photos over here? Let's look at them together." There was a sharp gasp on the other end of the line. "Mark, no, you don't understand. She's dangerous. She's going to lie her way out of it. Bring them over, Brenda. Now." Mark hung up the phone. The 30 minutes it took for Brenda to drive from Naperville to our apartment were the quietest minutes of my life. Mark and I didn't talk. We just sat on the couch holding hands. The anger between us had completely evaporated, replaced by a unified, grim determination to face the monster outside our door. When the doorbell rang, Mark went to open it. Brenda walked in, holding a thick manila folder against her chest. She looked triumphant, like a savior arriving to rescue her brother from a trap. She didn't even look at me sitting on the couch. "Mark, thank God," she started, pulling the papers out of the folder. "Look at this. This is a professional report. She's been meeting this man, Julian, at his restaurant. Look at how close they are sitting. Look at him hugging her. She's using your money to live a double life." Mark didn't take the papers. He just stood there, looking at his sister with a look of absolute disgust. "How much did the report cost, Brenda?" Mark asked quietly. Brenda blinked, her triumphant smile faltering. "What? Mark, that doesn't matter. I paid for it because I love you." "No, you didn't pay for it," I said, standing up from the couch and walking toward her. "We paid for it. $33,000 from our joint savings account, which you stole by accessing Mark's identity and setting up a fraudulent account at Great Lakes Credit Union." Brenda's face went completely white. The confidence drained out of her body so fast she actually stepped backward against the front door. I don't know what you're talking about. I used my own savings. We have the IP login history from Mark's laptop, Brenda," Mark said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Every single wire transfer was authorized from your house in Naperville. The recovery email on the investigator's portal is yours. You stole our house fund. You stalked my wife, and the worst part, you're so blind by your hatred for her that you didn't even read the final page of the report you're holding." Brenda looked down at the papers in her hand, her fingers trembling. "Read the conclusion, Brenda," I said, crossing my arms. "Read the part where the investigator tells you that Julian is a gay man who has been happily married to his husband for 6 years, and that our meetings were entirely about a corporate graphic design contract for his restaurant group. Read the part where they tell you there is zero evidence of infidelity. Brenda frantically flipped to the back of the report, her eyes scanning the text. As she read the words, the realization of her complete, total failure set in. She hadn't just committed grand larceny and identity theft. She had done it all for absolutely nothing. She had left a perfect digital paper trail of her crimes, spent $33,000 of stolen money, and handed us the exact evidence we needed to put her in prison. She looked up at Mark, her eyes welling with tears, her voice turning into a high-pitched whine. "Mark, please, I did it to protect you. She's not right for you. I knew she was hiding something. I just wanted to save you." "Get out," Mark said. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. The quietness of his voice was terrifying. "Get out of our apartment before I call the police right now." "Mark, please. I'm your sister. You can't do this over her." "You stole $33,000 from us, Brenda," Mark said, opening the front door. "You are not my sister. You are a thief and a stalker. If that money isn't back in our account by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, I am walking into the police precinct with this laptop and filing a full report for identity theft and bank fraud. Get out, you." Brenda looked at me, a look of pure venom in her eyes, but she knew she had lost completely. She grabbed her bag, snatched her folders, and ran out of the apartment into the hallway. Mark slammed the door behind her and locked it. He turned around, leaned his back against the door, and slid down onto the floor, putting his face in his hands. I walked over and sat on the floor next to him, pulling his head onto my shoulder. We stayed like that for hours. That was 3 weeks ago. Brenda's husband, who apparently had no idea what his wife had done, called Mark the next morning in a complete panic. He took out a personal loan against their equity to transfer the full $33,000 back into our joint savings account before the 9 a.m. deadline. He begged Mark not to file criminal charges, saying it would ruin their family and their kids' lives. Mark agreed not to press charges on one condition. Brenda was to have zero contact with us for the rest of our lives. If she ever sends a text, shows up at our home, or mentions my name to anyone in the family, the flash drive goes straight to the district attorney. Mark's family is completely fractured now. His parents think we overreacted by threatening to put Brenda in jail, saying family should handle things internally. They think I'm the one driving a wedge between Mark and his sister. My friends, on the other hand, think we were too soft, and that Brenda belongs behind bars for what she did to my safety and peace of mind. Mark ended up turning down a secondary lower-level position at his firm and started interviewing with a competitor. He wants a completely fresh start, away from the stress that allowed this paranoia to grow in our lives. We are using the money to finally put a down payment on a house, far away from Chicago and far away from his family. We are trying to rebuild our relationship, but it's hard. Every time the phone rings, every time a password needs to be entered, there's a split second of tension. The money is back, but the feeling of safety inside my own life is completely gone. I look at my husband, and I know he didn't do this to me, but I also know that our life was twisted into a nightmare because of the bloodline he shares. I honestly don't know if we overreacted by cutting the entire family off, or if we should have gone through with the police report to make her face real legal consequences. My parents think I'm wrong for letting Mark alienate his mother and father over this. I still don't know what to think.